As I'm sure you guys know by now, there's a common trend on social media of downplaying past eras, most notably the 80s and the 90s. And how so-called fans are doing this, they're looking at lowlights, cherry-picking games here, there, bad plays, turnovers, missed shots, etc.
The thing is, Jordan ain't got no left. We done with the 80s. Watch this. Check this move out. He behind the backboard. What he doing?
Now, if your IQ is above room temperature, you know this type of analysis is the bottom of the barrel. As for any era in NBA history, there is lowlights. And to the fans doing this, I just want to give you guys a warning. Back in the 2010s, there was an entire show and segment on TNT dedicated to lowlights.
This is Shaq in the Fool, by the way, and here's our latest installment.
Out of there by Abia. Rule in transition, walks into the three, hits the floor, no call, and then an errant pass by Nurk.
Oh, Sadiq staying in front. Ball gets away.
What is
And
James
Sadiq will
Harden
take it
doing?
away from Harden and drive and dunk. I didn't even see that.
Man, one. No, he only moved once, twice, three, four.
Come on, man.
Step back, 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, man.
And one thing I do want to go more in depth with is superstar players from different eras who transcended multiple eras. Most notably, Michael Jordan and John Stockton, as I think both these players are kind of the perfect guinea pig of how players can adapt to different eras. And first, looking at John Stockton, his Jazz team in '98, which some call a bad opponent for Jordan, that same Jazz team swept a Lakers team that won 61 games, had Shaq, Kobe, Eddie Jones, and Nick Van Exel. Shaq at that point, smack dab in the middle of his prime. Kobe Bryant, not there yet, but still an all-star. Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, all-star players. John Stockton, age 35, Malone, also that same age, swept this Lakers team with tons of talent and great players in the next decade. And many forget that same Jazz team, with an old John Stockton, beat the Tim Duncan, Dave Robinson Spurs 4-1. The fact John Stockton's Jazz defeated Tim Duncan and Kobe, the two best players of the 2000s, speaks volumes of how good the 90s actually were. And I think getting down to the main issue of this, when someone sees Jeff Hornacek, John Stockton, two white guys kind of scrawny, they write them off. But again, if you're going to write these guys off, look at the current era of NBA players. Nikola Jokic is a walking 30, 10, and 10. You look at his body, his physique, looks like the white Fat Albert, but on the basketball court can dominate off pure skill. Even someone like James Harden, who's also highly skilled, Harden at this point, a little chunky overweight, and still a walking 20 and 10. And looking past James Harden and Nikola Jokic, the guy who debunks the "we know what the 90s" myth the most is of course Michael Jordan. As in Jordan's career, drafted in '84, peaked in the 90s, and still played in the early 2000s. And in all those eras to my knowledge, he's the only player all time to score 50 plus points in 3 different decades. If the 80s, 90s were trash, how could Jordan in the 2000s versus players who played in the 2010s be that dominant? And I want to do some player comparisons versus Jordan head to head to debunk this myth thoroughly. Michael Jordan, age 39 and 40, played the infamous Jason Terry. Now, the Jet in '02, in his prime at around 19 points per game, his best individual seasons. And despite that, versus Michael Jordan head-to-head, Jordan outscored him, was a better passer, had more rebounds, and shot better from the field with much better defense. Now, Jordan destroying a prime Jason Terry, the best version of Jason Terry. Why is that so important? Because that same player, that same Jason Terry, 8 years later in the NBA Finals would outplay and outscore some people's GOAT. This right here is clear-cut proof Michael Jordan could transcend any era, as if he outplayed Jason Terry, who outplayed LeBron James, what does that say about the 1990s? And for someone like Terry, not a freak athlete, never an all-star, not even a top 25 scorer any point in his career, for him to outclass the bigger, stronger, and faster player, how is that possible?
For Magic, what do you expect from LeBron tonight?
I want to see him, Stewart, have some fun. Get into his defense, because the key is, can he stop Jason Terry?
What did you just say?
Can he stop Jason Terry?
The fact Magic Johnson had to question LeBron James stopping Jason Terry. I mean, what are we doing here, folks? Michael Jordan versus Terry at age 40 held him to 2 points on 1 of 8 shooting, and numerous times versus the Jet scored 30-plus points. And keeping with the same theme of Jordan outplaying LeBron's big-time rivals, look at Paul Pierce. In the early 2000s, Paul Pierce was one of the best scorers and players in the entire league, and him and Antoine Walker with the 0-2 Celtics made the Eastern Conference Finals. Despite Boston being a pretty good team, Pierce averaging 26 points per game and all-star at his peak, Jordan still held Pierce to a standstill in their individual matchups. And if you compare Jordan to himself versus Paul Pierce, increased level of play where Paul got worse in multiple aspects. And Paul Pierce being a guy drafted in the late 90s, played in the 2000s and 2010s, even the late 2010s. He's one of the perfect guys to ask about 90s defense and how hard it is compared to today's NBA.
First off, when I got into the league, you could do a little more grabbing, a little more hand checking, and a little more when you run across the lane, you would get that bump, and they would never call that. And you look at this, Scottie Pippen's hands all over, that's no foul. Look at this. Today, the advantage is to the offense today because people love watching offensive plays, rightfully so. Whereas in the 90s, it was definitely tougher.
And Paul Pierce, much like Jason Terry, not a freak athlete, slow, kind of had a YMCA game. And still in the 2010s, according to LeBron James, was his biggest rival. I mean, going back through NBA history, the crossover in eras, how closely intertwined these players are, people don't realize that. I mean, look at LeBron's first time in the NBA playoffs. The team he lost to was the 06 Pistons. Now on that Pistons team, who was their leading scorer? It was Rip Hamilton. Rip Hamilton, only 4 years prior, was a teammate of Michael Jordan and the second best player on Jordan's Wizards. And for 1 second, very quickly, looking back at Paul Pierce, what team in the 2000s, early 2010s gave LeBron his biggest fits? That, of course, was the Boston Celtics. Now look at this Boston team. Paul Pierce, drafted 99, played versus Jordan on the Wizards. Ray Allen, drafted 96, played versus Jordan on the Bulls and Wizards. And then Kevin Garnett, drafted in 95. I mean, these guys right here were products of the 1990s. And still in the late 2000s, early 2010s, were giving LeBron's Heat and Cavs their biggest struggle. I mean, these old geezers, who were 35, 36, even 37 in 2012, pushed LeBron's Heat to the brink of elimination multiple times. The fundamental problem with downplaying the 90s, calling that era trash, is that certain superstars, all-star players, even role players, played well into the 2000s, if not 2010s. And in some cases, a guy like Vince Carter made it all the way to the 2020s. And Vince, much like Paul Pierce, he's seen everything, experienced all different eras and types of play. And to Vince's credit, he has reverence for all those eras, especially the 90s and early 2000s.
Bad Boys and all that. He averaged 30 when they weren't really calling fouls, touch fouls and all that. Now, just imagine putting guys like Iverson, even early Kobe, like guys in that era. We're talking about back in that day who didn't really get the call. Like they had to earn no blood, no foul type mentality. When we walked in, that's what referees would say to you. Are you bleeding? Well, quit crying. That's kind of what it was. So I just think you take those guys who used to take a beating and average those numbers, put them in that game today, and what would it be like for them? You know, do you add 5, 10 more points to their average?
So that right there is the end of the video. And once again, looking at different eras, different superstars, I mean, tons of these guys played in the late 90s, mid 90s, also 2000s, and even 2010s. That alone shows you guys, players can transcend eras and adapt in real time. And the fact Michael Jordan was out playing Jason Terry, Paul Pierce, big time rivals of LeBron James, that speaks volumes. So, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.